So there's a lot of different shipping terms that you're going to come across, but the two most often that you're going to be dealing with are something called EXW or EXWORKS or FOB, which stands for free on board. Free on board is usually the most favorable for you. So when you're negotiating with your supplier, always try to get FOB if you can, because that means that they will actually get it from their factory to the port. And especially if the factory is a long ways from the port, those costs can add up quite a bit. But some factories, they don't want to mess with that, so they're going to quote you EXW. And in that case, your freight forwarder is going to arrange for a truck to come to the factory and actually pick the goods up and get them to the port. And there'll be an additional charge. Another thing that comes into play when you're shipping are tariffs and duties, and we talked about those a little bit in the last module. But in order to determine what the tariff and duties are on a particular product, there's something called an HTS code. HTS stands for Harmonized Tariff Schedule. And these are universal codes that are good worldwide. The numbers on part of the codes change slightly depending on the country, but the base of the code is the same across the entire world. Everything is classified into one of these codes. So if you have like a mirror, you got to know specifically what type of mirror is it. Is it a makeup mirror that's small on a desktop? Is it a mirror that hangs on the wall? Is it a mirror that's going into a commercial establishment? All those could have different codes. So it's very, very important to actually classify your products in the correct code. Now there's sometimes where things could fit into more than one code. You could actually, it could be into this code or it could be into that code. And there could be advantages to that. So that's where your freight forwarder can come in and actually help you choose the right code, because choosing the wrong code could cost you a lot more in duties and tariffs. Now if you want to see what the codes are, you could Google this, you can ask your freight forwarder. A lot of times you can even ask your factory. Other things that I've done is I've gone to like Import Dojo and I've taken a look at the bill of ladings that are shown there for like my competition for some of their products and see what they imported under. You can also get a ruling from the U.S. Customs office and actually send them a sample of your product and say, can you give me a ruling on this? And they'll actually give you a letter that says this is how we classify it, if you want to make sure you're completely in compliance. Some people like to do that. But those HTS codes are critical and they can add a lot to your bottom line if it's done incorrectly. Or if you misclassify something, sometimes when it's imported, if they catch it and do an audit, they can actually charge you some penalties as well for misclassifying it. Another thing that can happen when you're shipping is you could have damage in transit. And that's where insurance comes in. So you might want to consider actually getting insurance to actually cover any kind of damage in transit, because once it leaves the factory, if it's EXW, once it leaves the factory, you're responsible for it. If it's FOB, once it hits that port, you're responsible for it. It's all your responsibility. So if anything happens, it's no longer the factory's problem. So that's where insurance can come in, and it's relatively inexpensive. And so you might want to consider getting insurance on each of your shipments coming over. Another thing to keep in mind is that sometimes the factories can make mistakes. Sometimes they can actually put the wrong value on your commercial invoice. Sometimes they could actually have told you one weight or one size, and the size and dimensions are actually different. Sometimes the factories will actually quote you as say FOB, and then later on they try to switch it to EXWORKS. And you got to be careful with that they will sometimes pull a little bait and switch there on you. So you got to watch and make sure you're actually getting what you agreed to, getting charged any additional fees. There's also sometimes theft. I mean, honestly, once it usually leaves China, there's not going to be too much of a problem. But depending on the country, if you're shipping out of some African countries or some South American countries, you can have an issue of theft, especially on higher value items. Like high value electronics or high value perfumes or something like that. Sometimes there's actually some theft that occurs. So you can get insurance against that as well. But keep in mind, when you're shipping into Amazon, there's a lot of seasonality, and especially when it comes to the fourth quarter or Q4, which typically runs October through December. And rates can go high during this time. Rates can also go high when it comes around Chinese New Year, because everybody's trying to get their orders in and get everything shipped before China basically shuts down for a couple weeks. So keep those things in mind as well. If you're bringing stuff in for the fourth quarter and you're going to try to launch during the holiday season, you really need to try to have that stuff arrive by August, early September at the latest. So you really got to get ahead of it. Otherwise, your freight costs are going to go up. You could experience some delays. So seasonality, it can play a major role, your logistics. Another thing is you got to keep in mind are long-term storage fees at Amazon. Amazon charges two types of storage fees. They'll charge you a monthly storage fee based on how much space your products are taking up on their shelves. And then if the stuff sits there for too long, every 6 months, Amazon assesses a long-term storage fee, and those fees can be exceptionally high. And so you really want to make sure you manage your inventory right and you don't just have stuff sitting there. If you do have stuff sitting there over the long term, you're going to want to pull some of that back out to your 3PL or to your house or donate it somewhere so you don't get hit with those fees, because they can be extremely high. And the fees also are higher during the fourth quarter on Amazon too for storage. So Amazon actually charges more for storage fees, and you'll see this like in the X-ray tool. It will actually show you a difference between quarters 1 through 3 and quarter 4 in storage fees when you have stuff sitting at the Amazon warehouses. Check-in times are something else you got to keep in mind when you're shipping to Amazon. Like I mentioned in the last module, usually shipping by UPS or FedEx Ground into Amazon is going to be a lot faster. It's not that always the cheapest way, but things typically get checked in pretty quick versus if you ship by truck, you ship pallets by truck. Sometimes those get checked in within a week. Sometimes those can take, I've had them take 6 weeks to get checked in, because those truckers have to make appointments, and those appointments, depending on how busy the warehouse is, can get backed up. Sometimes they can go there and they can sit for 12 hours waiting to unload their truck, and then Amazon says, sorry, we can't take you today, and they have to come back the next day and you get charged some additional fees. It can add up really, really quickly. So whenever possible, ship in, I recommend you ship in by UPS and use an Amazon's accounts to ship that because it's dirt cheap, and the tracking numbers are generated automatically, the labels are generated automatically, everything goes into the system, and Amazon knows it's on the way. They also know it's on the way when you ship by truck, but just the small package stuff is just the better way to go if you can do that and it makes sense. Another thing to keep in mind is you can't do it yourself. You can't, if you live close to an Amazon warehouse, you can't just go down there and like load the stuff up in your SUV and drop it off. You have to use a partnered carrier. So even if you live really close to around the corner from one of these Amazon warehouses, you're going to have to ship it in using Amazon's methodology. And the same goes for going to the port. You can't just go show up at the airport or show up at the port and actually pick up your stuff. It has to go through the proper channels and be cleared and everything first. Now, when you ship into Amazon, when you're logged into Seller Central, Amazon will show the status of your items. It'll show inbound if they have a tracking number that's been entered into the system and it's been scanned. And so you can see that how many units are inbound, that are on their way into an Amazon warehouse. If they're fully checked in, it will actually say in stock, which means customers can actually order them and Amazon is ready to ship them right away. Sometimes you'll see something that says reserved. Reserved means Amazon is either, those are either customers who've ordered them and Amazon's just waiting to ship them out, or Amazon is checking something or doing a bin check, or perhaps even moving a few things around, or maybe you've done a withdrawal order, a removal order, and Amazon just is holding those back, but they haven't actually picked them off the shelf yet. So that'll show as reserved. You'll also see FC transfer or FC processing. FC transfer means Amazon is transferring it to other warehouses. So oftentimes what Amazon will have you do is they'll have you ship it into what's called a cross stock. And these are like receiving warehouses. And sometimes they actually have a companion warehouse where they actually fulfill from, and other times all they do is they just process. So for example, you might ship in 500 units to a cross-dock warehouse in Dallas. And then Amazon's algorithm will then determine, well, you know what, based on our algorithm, we think we need to have 20 of these in Mississippi, we need to have 16 of these in Oklahoma, we need to have 13 of them in Chicago, another 12 in Missouri. And so Amazon will split those off and they'll put them on their own trucks and they'll ship them off to fulfillment centers in those individual states. So while that's happening, the customers can't order your items. So actually we'll say like FC transferring, and that means they're transferring it between fulfillment centers. And then other times it'll say FC processing, and that means it's actually showed up at another fulfillment center, but it just hasn't been properly checked in yet, hasn't been put up on the shelf. It's waiting to actually be made ready to ship or pulled and shipped in one of the warehouses. So those are some of the things that you'll see in the back end of Seller Central. A lot of times when you first ship in your items, once the first 1 or 2 items arrive, the customer might actually see this is available in X number of days. It might say something like in stock in 6 days. But oftentimes that number shrinks pretty quickly. So you might check it today and it says in stock in 6 days, and then tomorrow it might say in stock in 4 days, and then the following day it may say in stock. So those are just estimates that they give the customer, and they err on the side of caution there, but usually things get checked in pretty quickly and are available to ship. So hopefully this has helped you know a little bit more about some of the issues that arise during shipping and some of the things that you'll be dealing with. I look forward to seeing you in the next module.